Today I want to show you how the large foundations, many run by giant multinational corporations, are conspiring together to create a new parallel society where they control all of the information that you and I are privy to. They want to do this, of course, so that they can bring in their agenda items without any dissent, without contradictory facts making their way into the public discourse. They have a lot of ways of going about doing this. They're running conferences for journalists, many of them per year. They are granting fellowships for aspiring journalists and for ones that are already in the industry. They are funding startups that are making apps which you can add to your phone that the media companies are employing in their newsrooms, which purport to sift through the internet and find truth and then present it. But what they're really doing is they're creating almost a cult. They're doing to journalism what this same cultural Marxist, progressive, communist, socialist cult did to the education system. And to a large degree what pharma industry did to peer-reviewed medical journals. They're basically buying up the entire playing field and putting out of business anyone who says things that run against their mission. And they're doing this, as they always do, by pretending to be heroes, humanitarians, activists for human rights. They're the foundations, corporate foundations and foundations for the uber wealthy. A great example to start with will be the Sandlers. Have you ever heard of the Sandlers? You should have, but I bet you haven't. And that's because they are a main player in controlling the narrative. Before they got into that, though, the Sandlers bought a bank way back in the 80s, Golden West Bank in California. The Sandlers bought it for $4 million, and they built it up using the sketchy financial products that brought us the financial crash of 2008. They were among the worst culprits. They did it so well and so often that they built this bank up from $4 million to $25 billion. That's what they sold the bank for to Wachovia a year and a half or so before the financial crisis hit. Wachovia lost billions. I think they lost more than half of their investment. And the Sandlers waltzed away. One of the things they did right away with that $25 billion is they took a huge chunk of it and they started investing in foundations, their own. They set up their own, but they also gave money to Acorn, Media Matters, Center for American Progress, which is John Podesta, and all kinds of sketchy far-left organizations. What they did with their own money was they set up ProPublica. Now, ProPublica is very interesting. It's on the forefront of this humanitarian journalism that purports to fact-check and hold power to account. It's just funny how it always comes out on one side of the equation. The Sandlers set up ProPublica, and it must have been very successful because it is one of the main problems we've got now. You see, what it does is it undercuts traditional investigative journalism. It operates like a newswire. So what small publications, local papers, for example, if they want to get a story out of Germany or France or anywhere in the world, some investigative piece that they can't afford to produce themselves, they'll go to a newswire service. And usually they've gone to AP, the Associated Press, or Reuters or something like that. But those organizations charge the small papers a fee to use them per article. So ProPublica came along and they said, we'll do the same thing, but we'll give you our articles for free. How is that a sustainable business model in any way, shape, or form? It's not under capitalism, but it sure is under socialism. And these guys are very, very left-leaning. So what they do is they go solicit donations from all kinds of their really rich buddies. Some of these really rich people might have things they don't want to get put into the newspaper. So it's almost a form of hush money when you think about it. They could also use this for trying to take out competition. Anytime you see them attacking one corporation in particular, you have to wonder, is someone donating to their foundation in order that they will attack a corporate competitor? Perhaps. It's just a theory. So what I want to show you now is the main people, the main players involved in some of this. To give you a visual, who are the foundations that are trying to take over information? Google is a main one, and it has subsidiary companies, Alphabet and Jigsaw. Jigsaw comes up a lot when you research all these new startups that have to do with fact-checking. Jigsaw comes up a lot. But there's more. There's the Knight Foundation. There's the Omidyar Network, and that's the guy from eBay. There's Open Society Foundation, which invests in a lot of these. That's George Soros. Bill and Melinda Gates. Bill and Melinda Gates invest in vaccinations in the third world and geoengineering technology. Almost anything that you worry about, AI, things like that, Bill and Melinda Gates are main investors. The National Endowment for Democracy, the local one and the global one, invests in taking over information. Craig Newmark Philanthropies, have you even heard of this? Do you know who this is? That's the guy from Craigslist. How did he get so rich running a free classified website? It's a good question. And here's the Sandler Foundation, of course. The Sandler Foundation is ProPublica. But just look at all these other outlets that say that they are doing humanitarian work, fact-checking, making sure journalists do the right thing, say the right thing, and are always, always providing the public with the best, most accurate information. There's all of these here, and there's more. Here's the big boys. First Draft, ATC Innovation Lab, NewsGuard, Storyful, Duke Reporters Lab, Reveal, all of these, some big and small. Kinzen here is actually the baby of the same guy who made Storyful. That guy, Mark Little, who's out of Ireland, he made Storyful and then he sold it to News Corp, which is Rupert Murdoch. Now he's working on Kinzen. Kinzen's very interesting because it's very cult-like. If you go check out their site, they say, join us, be part of the hive mind that will determine the truth. We rely on you. And you have to pay a monthly fee. You actually have to pay to be a part of Kinzen. But in, exchange for that, you're in a community of people who are the arbiters of what is true and what is false. One of the main aggregators, sort of all the news about fact-checking and the new world of journalism is Poynter. This is a huge institution. It's American. And its main efforts are News University, MediaWise, PolitiFact, and this, the International Fact-Checking Network. Let's spend a little time on the International Fact-Checking Network because of
out of 7 billion people on the planet, Mark Zuckerberg picks the owner of the ShadowNet.
President Donald Trump and Mike Pence both ran ads on Facebook that included the symbol of an upside-down red triangle. Facebook today removed the ads.
Facebook has taken action against what it calls harmful misinformation from President Trump. The company deleted a post by the president that included a false statement
To restore election integrity.
There's your rulers at it.
We all know that he was directly connected to Cambridge Analytica through Cygroup and Wikistrat. So essentially what they did was they partnered with Cambridge Analytica again.
This also explains why Facebook went to Atlantic Council, aka Jones, to fix the Cambridge Analytica problem. They needed to cover their IIA tracks. What you've seen with the recent riots surrounding George Floyd's death, from your perspective, does that look like an IIA operation?
Absolutely. spending some money on some Facebook ads, right? If you believe that, then they've already won.
So
There's your handlers right there. Your puppet. Einstein said it's easy to be fooled, but it's hard to admit it. That's what they're doing, they're laughing at us.
Laws, they tell us. And you know, for the most part, I think all of us. It's very big in the background. It's got a lot of money behind it, a ton of power behind it, and it's finding its way into more and more newsrooms. And just to give you an idea here, Pointer has net assets of almost $40 million. Some of its main funders are the Koch Foundation, Google News Labs, Craig Newmark Foundation, the Knight Foundation, McClatchy, Ahmadiyar, and Open Society, as well as these other ones. Oh, there's the National Endowment for Democracy too. So right away, you can see how many of these main guys feed back into Pointer. So it's very, very influential. Who's involved in this international fact-checking network? One of the main guys is Alexios Mantzouris. This Alexios Mantzouris,
Robert Hannigan was part of the company at GSG, right? So I gave most of this information to Millie Weaver, and she put out a report. And even though I had legal access to all their communications, because I had my username and password, the minute she did that report, within just, I believe, almost instantaneously, the website was taken down and my access was revoked. They changed it across the planet. Maybe we should look at some old articles that I put out on Hurricane Electric to find those servers and those little bits and seed them correctly. So, I mean, you'd be able to seed it with something like a keystone.
She's so smart.
I want to ask you about John Brennan and the blackmail. So, who all did he have blackmail collected on? Part of the biggest whistleblowing event to date.
I'm one of thousands faceless, patriotic Americans that work within the shadows. I've been doing that for a very long time. People that worked for John Brennan approached me while I was in my specialist training while I was in the Navy. When I was recruited, it was for electronic warfare. Then I ended up in information warfare, and ironically, the base that I first went to for electronic.
he drafted a lesson plan on fact-checking for UNESCO. He served as managing editor of He shepherded a partnership between third-party fact-checkers and Facebook. In January 2018, he was invited to join the European Union's high-level group on fake news. He drafted a lesson plan on fact-checking for UNESCO. He served as managing editor of Pagella Politica and Fact Check EU. We'll get back to that in just a minute. And before becoming a fact-checker, he worked for the United Nations. This very influential organization, the International Fact-Checking Institute, or Network, is run by a guy who used to work at the United Nations. Wouldn't you want a journalist to oversee that? Well, not if you're a globalist, not necessarily, because the idea is not about journalism, it's about control. It's just about combating what they are labeling misinformation. And of course, what they label misinformation is anything that runs against their narrative. Let me give you an example. I have a tweet here from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Let's look at it. Gonna keep it 100, she says. The biggest threats to journalism right now are tech monopolies and concentration of ownership. Healthy democracy requires high-quality journalism. Blah, blah, blah. And then right away, after that, she says, we cannot allow the financing of misinformation campaigns to shape our democracy. We can disagree on policy, but climate change is real, period. Well, if that don't just say it all. You see, she says some good things, but then steers everybody down the wrong alleyway. What she means there is that the independent journalism, the well-funded independent journalists that they need in abundance for a healthy democracy, they all have to agree with each other. So it's never really about the truth or access to information. It's about the narrative. Back to Alexios Mansourilis here. You'll notice here it says disclosure, that he was managing editor of Pagella Politica and Fact Check EU. It says disclosure. If you click on that disclosure, it explains that he is still working for them, in addition to being the chairman of the International Fact-Checking Network out of the US. What does that mean? Well, let's have a look at Pagella Politica. Here's their main page right now. What is it talking about? Immigration, migrants, immigration, debunking. Yes, debunking the misinformation that might make people distrust migrants or speak out against immigration. That is clearly the top priority of Pagella Politica. On their Facebook page also, its most recent post when I captured this was about migrants. So you can see what direction that's all going. Alexios Mansourilis and his organization here, Pagella Politica, is involved in this project, SOMA, Join the Effort to Reduce the Risks and Threats Created by Disinformation. That is a project of the European Union, and that's ongoing right now. So here you've got a guy that used to work at the United Nations, who is now heading up the International Fact-Checking Network, which is a huge, far-reaching organization based in the United States, which exists on donor money, whose donors are most of these characters here, who is also working hand in hand with the with the European Union to combat misinformation, what they're calling misinformation. And obviously, we see the direction they're going. Only one truth. And that truth is their agenda. Nothing that counters their agenda will be allowed to be seen or read or heard. It just will simply not qualify in this international fact-checking network. Let's say I wanted to start a fact-checking network. Let's say somebody on the right did this. Started a foundation and hired the people and wanted to join the International Fact-Checking Network. Would we be able to? Maybe, maybe not. Because a high priority is placed on screening the applicants. The advisory board will decide who gets allowed into the International Fact-Checking Network. The most important of these is the IFCN Advisory Board, which has a consultative role. Let's have a look at their board. Here they are here. You can see each one of them is involved in their own fact-checking company, so to speak. And this is the most important guy, the chair of the board, Peter Cunliffe-Jones. If you look, you can find that Peter Cunliffe-Jones is tied directly to the Open Society Initiative, and that's George Soros. They've taken the page down from the website, but the menu, the Google result is still there. There's a supplementary board at Pointer that screens applicants as well. Just for a hoot, I decided to look up the first three of these people and see what I found. We'll start with Fergus Bell. Fergus Bell is a founding member of First Draft News, and it's supported by Google News Labs. Here, First Draft. The second guy on this list is Mark Coddington. If we look for Mark Coddington, we find that he's an assistant professor of journalism, and that he attended this conference here, the International Symposium of Online Journalism. And who funds that? Facebook, the Knight Foundation, Open Society Foundations, and Google, among others. So once again, we're back to this list. Who do we have next? Steve Fox. Where are you, Mr. Fox? There you are. He's associated, as you see, with the Poynter Institute and something called the Online News Association. Well, what's that? The Online News Association is a non-profit membership organization for digital journalists. They hold meetups in Silicon Valley. They sponsor mentorships in inclusive newsrooms. Here are some of their partners: the New York Times, NPR, The Intercept, Toronto Star, Politico, a whole bunch. And that's not all of them. That says that's just some of them. The Online News Association's vice president is Mandy Jenkins, who just happens to be director of news at Storyful. If you remember, yes, my last video was all about Storyful, and here it is among the big 10 or so of the fact checkers. Oh, and wouldn't you know it, the Online News Association receives funding from the Open Society Foundation. So that's just the first 3. I didn't look at the rest, but I'm pretty sure if I searched, it would